Hello, I'm Fabrício Fava, and I'm an integrated researcher at I2ADS, the Research Institute of Art, Design, and Society. And first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference for the opportunity to present our work and for opening the space to the debate of the challenging circumstances of today's education. I will present the work Ignitions on Educational Experiences During the Pandemic, which is co-authored by Camila Mangueira, myself, and Miguel Carvalhais, and is aimed at understanding how the teachers of the Faculty of Fine Arts of the University of Porto in Portugal responded to the challenges provoked by the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we may all be aware of, the COVID-19 pandemic state was declared by the World Health Organization in March 2020. Such decision was followed by a series of changes and restrictions imposed by governments all around the world. One of them was to change to a remote mode of teaching across a wide range of courses. Such a shift took educators by surprise and ignited the necessity of rethinking and adapting their contents, materials, methods, and pedagogical approaches on the fly, as the semester was already underway. At the end of the semester, by June 2020, my colleagues and I conducted a two-phase research. In the first phase, we asked teachers, students, and technicians to share their stories in order to identify relevant experiences implemented during the period. We then selected 18 teachers who represented various courses, such as communication design, art studies, fine arts, and distinct cycles of study, from bachelor to doctoral degrees. In the second phase of the study, we invited the selected teachers for an online interview, averaging 45 minutes long, and which goal was to gather deeper insights on their impressions and responses to the shift for virtual classrooms. As a result of the analysis of nearly 14 hours of conversations, we were able to perceive and document the general educational postures implemented. These were then synthesized into 6 categories of practices, which I will briefly introduce. These are generate networks, rethink materials and tools, reuse archives and materials, produce documents, create environments, and provoke dialogues. In a context without the presential interaction with others, a context where the collective dimension of learning seems to vanish, since the students were working from home, commonly isolated, and facing conditions the majority of teachers were not aware of, how could we promote reflection and ways of creating and sharing? Generate networks refer to the creative practice developed from remote collaborative work. Teachers restructured the exercise, practices, and peer encounters in a way to encourage creative responses based on students' own practices that were then developed or continued by their colleagues. It was also applied to promote creative dialogues from the exchange of textual, sound, or visual contents produced by each student. These were implemented, for example, by creating text instructions to be used in drawing or sculpture exercises, or by producing a series of photographs based on a previously given image. With the schools closed, students were unable to use the studios, laboratories, machinery, materials, and tools they needed to develop their projects. How could they then work with limited use of equipment and without seeing the proper demonstration of engraving, carving, and preaching techniques, to name a few? Rethink materials and tools is related to creative practices coming from the exploration of equipment, supports, and alternative work tools. Teachers found an opportunity to explore what they have not explored in the past, to rethink essential processes and tools related to their art practices, and to discover what students could do with so little. They promoted both research and creative practices to investigate the usage, design, and adaptation of daily utensils to the discovery of alternative spaces, tools, and materials. Students were also unable to borrow equipment from school. And in addition to that, they faced rigid restriction policies regarding the use of public spaces. So even if they owned audiovisual equipment, for example, which was not the case for the vast majority of them, they were limited by what they could find at home or what they could see through their windows or at their balconies. How could they produce original content and develop audiovisual projects in such a context? Reuse archives and materials refer to creative practices developed from the resignification of pre-existing contents. Students were provoked to experiment with alternative instruments or ways of producing content, as well as to explore personal or public archives of images, videos, and sounds, and to experiment with the audiovisual language to give this content a novel plasticity, significance, narrative. The impossibility of using the skills infrastructure impacted not only in the access to its resources, but also on the way teachers presented contents and demonstrated processes. Since they were unable to access the classes, they were also unable to access the classes, reproducing their way of teaching remotely would just not work. So how could they manage the use of digital tools to provide extra materials and facilitate both project development and autonomous study? Produced documents is related to the practice of producing materials to support asynchronous activities. This was implemented from both teachers and students' perspectives. In one hand, teachers produces their own documents, whether working alongside technicians to create video tutorials or manuals, or providing virtual tools from their art studios or offices to demonstrate techniques and tools that students could use or explore at home. On the other hand, some teachers asked students to register their own practices and research. This was made with the usage of diaries, notebooks, photographs, videos, and blogs. The presentation of students' projects and discussion of the iterative stage of its creative process started occurring in a remote mode. In such a context, technical factors such as the age of an equipment, the quality of the camera, and the internet connection started playing an important role for the quality of such presentations. Since teachers cannot control those aspects, what types of environments could be used to minimize such impacts and favor content sharing through digital platforms? Create environments refers to practices of creating spaces for sharing references, archives, and ideas. Teachers and students work on their digital competence and explore the digital platforms to allow them to collaborate, express ideas, and present work in both synchronous and asynchronous ways. Teachers also help the students in managing their home environments to adapt provisional workspaces and develop autonomous habits of studies. In spite of losing the physical presence and the nonverbal communication signs that it provides, the interaction through digital platforms has the potential to gather people located from different physical spaces. How could we take advantage of those platforms for the promotion of remote encounters? Provoke dialogues refers to the practices of promoting spaces for the connection of researchers and students. Teachers use this as an opportunity to encourage the exchange of ideas between students from different classes and even different cycles of study by promoting informal presentation sections. They also prepared open seminars with the participation of invited international scholars, making possible an initiative that would demand higher efforts in resources if done in a different context. All in all, if this period was marked by moments of uncertainty, difficulties, and constraints, it also ignited collaboration and empathy in a context where learning progressed in the course of an experience of education that valued the process over the final result. An essentially exploratory process that was promoted through autonomous research in which students were active agents of their own learning. This led to creative and transformative dynamics of teaching that worth be shared and that will hopefully contribute to the conversations regarding this new present of education and what the post-pandemic university could or should be. Thank you.